So I recently finished playing The Last of Us Part 2. One of the most talked about games in years is probably the best way to put it. Overall, this is a game that has been one of the most hyped, anticipated games for the back half of the 2010s, since its announcement in late 2016. And why would it not be? Naughty Dog released the first Last of Us back in June 2013, the swan song game of PS3, and what was the reception? One of the best games ever. Game of the Generation Awards and going toe-to-toe with Grand Theft Auto 5 for Game of the Year. So of course when a sequel is announced, everyone's excited, and after a few delays, the game is out and there has been a lot of chatter around it. So what is the point of this video? Well, I wanted to offer my own thoughts on the game, what I liked, did not like, and so on. As a fair warning, I will be talking about any and all spoilers as needed, so if you have not played the game yet, you have been warned. Just for point of reference, I have played the first game and the second game to completion. This is one of the few games where I had to collect my thoughts after beating it to get a feel for what I thought about it. The only one that recently did that was Death Stranding, but that was more to do with, is this a good game or not? For The Last of Us Part 2, the question for me was, did I like the story, and if so, did I like how they presented it? Overall, I really liked the story. For the game to basically kick off with Joel's death, it was impactful. Sets the tone for the rest of the game and honestly makes sense in this universe. See, the trailers kind of teased us Dana would have been the one to get killed, so Ellie goes on her revenge rampage, and then Joel has to go out and help her before she gets killed. While that may have sounded nice on paper, story-wise, it fails in two areas. One, we have not seen or heard of Dana until the E3 trailer, so to only know her for 2 to 3 hours in-game as Ellie's girlfriend before she is murdered, would that have an effect on the player? Yes, but not that impactful. With Joel biting the bullet, or I should say golf club, in this case, it leads Ellie on a revenge story where every player has the same taste for blood. Not only that, she has very little backup or support. She has Dana, yes, but soon she gets sidelined with her pregnancy, and they both have to worry about Tommy running off and shooting up Seattle until Jesse arrives to assist. There's a sense of urgency to get the job done and head back as soon as possible. With an Ellie and Joel adventure, the sense of urgency would be gone, as it would have focused on their relationship more than revenge. The other issue, if that theory happened, it assumes the relationship between Ellie and Joel has been good for the past 4 years. This would be hard to do because with the ending of the first game, you can tell Ellie does not believe him. You can't just sweep that away in the final version of the game. That lie Joel tells her eventually breaks their relationship. Also, personally, the flashback sequences in between Ellie's 3 days in Seattle are some of the best moments from both games. You have the museum scene, which basically shows them living as normal of a life they could, to the distrust Ellie could not get out of her head, to then going back to the hospital to confirm it, and then at the end, the night before everything went to shit, she offered to try and forgive Joel. So while we did not get a full game with Ellie and Joel as the main characters, Joel was still very important to the story and provided the best moments in the game. Also, as a quick mention before I move on to other thoughts about the game, the way he dies does fit in this world. Because if there's one thing set, is that people here do not get a heroic way out. It was not like that in the first game. And it was not like that with Joel or Jesse or any of Abby's friends. It just does not happen. In fact, if Joel went out taking half of Abby's group, like a badass, while cool, would not fit the tone of the story, or the feeling of helplessness you get as you, like Ellie, are forced to watch. The scene as shown made me sad and angry, which guess what? That's what Ellie feels, and now you, the player, and the character have the same emotion going to Seattle. Another character who people had an issue with is Tommy, in that he supposedly has a 100-degree change in character at the end of the game where he makes Ellie feel guilty for not wanting to go back out to kill Abby. Here, I thought his character development made perfect sense. At the start of the game, he just lost his brother and goes to Seattle himself to get revenge in place of Ellie, to protect the person Joel cared the most for in the world. Remember, at the beginning of the game, Joel tells Tommy what happened at the end of the first game, so he knows what he went through to keep her alive, and he was not willing to let her get herself killed. Now, is what he does much better? No, but the game does show you indirectly, for the most part, how much of a ruthless killer he can be. However, he suffers his many defeats in Seattle by becoming limp in one leg, blind in one eye, and yet again watching another member of Jackson die with Jesse being shot in front of him. Not only this, he does mention his marriage is basically done, so you have to think by the time he's done in Seattle, he cannot be a great protector of Jackson, ride a horse safe enough to do patrols, and is stuck just walking around town. This has given him plenty of time to wallow in anger, especially since Ellie moved out of Jackson with Dana. So while Tommy is a bit of an asshole at the end of the game, you can see where he's coming from. Killing Abby is the only thing he has left. As for what I thought about the other part of the story, aka Abby's side, I enjoyed it for the most part. However, it took some time. I liked the backdrop of the people around her preparing for war as she went off to find her friend, and this side brought a great character in Lev. I also found the war between the Seraphites and the WLF very interesting, and was actually disappointed it did not go into much more detail about it. I understand we are viewing the story from Abby's lens, but there was a lot of lore details put in about these two factions that I wanted to know more about. Now, while I did enjoy most of Abby's story, I did find day 1 to be a slog. Not just the fact that you had to level up new weapons and skills from scratch, but from location to location, it felt like it took forever. Day 2 and 3 for Abby is where things really picked up and was much more thrilling and nerve-wracking to play. Now, this brings me to the ending of the game, which I really liked. I understand people who are like, no, Abby has to die, or what's the point? While I understand that frustration, remember, this is Ellie's story. At this point, she has been forced by her guilt and by Tommy to go back out there and find Abby. And she thinks when she'll see her, she'll break her down, kill her, and move on. When she sees her wasted away from what the gang did to her, Abby showed no interest in fighting, and Ellie did not either until once again she saw images of Joel on the ground, and it snapped her into it. So while her choice of not killing Abby is part breaking the cycle of vengeance, I also think it is Ellie making a choice for herself and not wanting to do it, and realizing what good will actually come from it. Even making this choice right at the end of the story and not going through with it, Ellie still may have lost another person who cared for her, with Dana, who did not just wait at the farm, just like she said she would not do. Yes, the end of the game shows Ellie leaving the farm as well, and it is a safe assumption that she heads back to Jackson where Dana and their child should be. But there's no guarantee she takes Ellie back. What I take from the game is not just what revenge can do to people, but that it's an addiction, and that it can make people lose everything around them just for that hit. For Ellie, her addiction was getting revenge for Joel, and you can see what that cost her. But you could take these same themes of addiction and replace it with drugs or alcohol, and see how someone so consumed by it pushes the people who care about them away. That is what I took from the themes of the game as to how it was played. I thought the switch from Ellie to Abby halfway, though, is what defines this game in discussions years down the road. Playing the person you want to kill forces you not to sympathize or like them, but Naughty Dog tells you to just sit down and just understand their side of the story, where they are coming from. And Abby's hatred for Joel makes complete sense as well, including her friends' opinions on him. I think that in today's culture climate, this is a perfect game to come out, because as a society, I get the sense people are not understanding each other's opinions and problems. It's all, I'm right, you're wrong, and that's it. People need to communicate better, to have discussions and debates about each other's thoughts that do not end up in insulting or hating each other. Now, it's funny I say that because the initial launch for this game, discussions around it were messy, with people either strongly loving or hating the game, and death threats were sent out to people. It was terrible. Part of the reason I waited on this video is so that there may be a better discussion around it after some time was given for people to cool off. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2. What did you think of the game? Did you like it, hate it? Or you think I'm completely off base with my thinking? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.